Check out shares of Nvidia, one of the big winners in the S&P 500 today. Goldman Sachs and Stifel both reiterating buy ratings. Stifel hiking its price target from $202 to $212. Both firms say the company's well positioned ahead of earnings on Wednesday and for driving more growth. Now, for more on Nvidia ahead of its earnings, let's bring in Plexo Capital founding managing partner and CNBC contributor Toney. Lo, good to see you. So China, probably the big change over the past quarter for Nvidia. How much of an impact do you think that has? And, how much of the demand for Nvidia's technology do we already understand?
Yeah, China definitely, with the export restrictions, that reduces the ability to meet that demand. And then you also have some local competition from folks like Huawei that are gaining traction. But, the core growth is truly outside of China. And that's led by the big tech hyperscalers, as well as even some of the sovereigns. So I think on the upside, there's, the ability to potentially see a little bit of easing on the policy side. But China does remain a drag on the downside.
How much of a moat do you think Nvidia has against some of this competition? We talk about horsepower of chips and others trying to catch up, but with CUDA and with some of the racks that Nvidia is building out, there really is a comfort level that developers have with it. They're setting into ways of working that they might be loath to change.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, John, that is one of the key points that I always try to raise with folks when they think about the entire AI ecosystem and stack. There's three main layers. There's the infrastructure layer where NVIDIA plays, and then you have the models, OpenAI, Anthropic in the middle layer, and then on the top, the applications like Perplexity. And I think one of the things to point out is your note around the developers. You've got about 3 million developers that actively use the development program or application on NVIDIA. And boy, yes, it makes it really hard because, it's integrated in with all of their existing tools. NVIDIA's done a great job with that. And it's just part of their development life cycle. And so those things create a really nice moat that gives NVIDIA a definite competitive advantage.
I remember my days as a younger tech reporter 20 years ago thinking, boy, how many iPods would Apple have to sell to grow into this valuation? Is that even possible? And now, of course, I realize I was thinking about that all wrong. Along came the iPhone and the App Store and all of that stuff. What's the potential NVIDIA equivalent of that? We tend to think, okay, well, how many of these chips would NVIDIA have to sell as they grow into this valuation? But there are other areas, other technologies, perhaps even acquisitions on the horizon for the company, no?
Yeah, I think that NVIDIA will continue to exercise its dominance, and it does really have opportunities to increase up the stack as well. When you look at the competition, there's competition from folks that just focus on chips, and obviously the hyperscalers like, Amazon probably being the most aggressive in developing its own chips. But I think when we always, to your point around thinking about the mobile revolution, when we look backwards and think about what our predictions were, we often tend to underestimate them in hindsight. And I think that's what we're likely going to see when we think about the future of AI.
Let's talk about the hyperscalers. We were talking to Matt Garman just a couple of weeks ago here on Overtime, the CEO of AWS, and as much work as they're putting into developing their own chips, he was very careful to say, we work a lot with NVIDIA. I talk to Jensen all the time. What does that say about the allocation needs of these hyperscalers still for NVIDIA, even as they seek to build out their own chips that allow them to perhaps have a cost advantage down the line?
Yeah, John, that's right. And I think today, the approach that a hyperscaler like Amazon is taking, and by the way, Amazon has been probably the most aggressive in the development and production of their own chips, and they have an important role to play and an important market position to keep, and are looking at cost advantages at scale. So I would say today, Amazon is kind of taking a little bit of a premium approach and buying the NVIDIA chips when it's a mission critical or a super heavy compute that needs to occur within AI. And then for their own chips, it's kind of, like a lower end approach, a lower cost approach for folks that want to use their own chips. Like, let's take a look at OpenAI versus Anthropic. OpenAI is pretty much in their partnership with Microsoft, all in on Nvidia. Then you have a model producer like Anthropic. They're taking a little bit more of a balanced approach and kind of, not tying themselves to any one hyperscaler or chip